In the city where glass towers rose above the streets like bright teeth, people learned quickly who had power and who did not. At the top of one very tall building lived Rafael Cortez. His name was on the building. He appeared on television smiling at charity events and speaking about success. To strangers and to cameras, he seemed calm and generous. To the people who worked in his building, he was often sharp and rude. Maria cleaned Rafael's penthouse. She had come to the city many years ago. She kept the house neat. She polished silver until it shone. She folded linen with careful hands. Her work was steady and true. She worked early and late. She earned little, but she held her work like a small, warm lamp. When bills came, she worried. When her daughter needed shoes, she counted coins. Still, she kept her head up. She was proud even when the days were hard. Lena was Maria's daughter. She was 20, soft-spoken, and strong in a quiet way. During the day she went to college. In the evenings she worked at a bakery to help pay the rent. She read books and made simple plans for a future that looked better than the present. Lena knew how to type a clear letter and how to count money. She had learned to listen to people and to help them find words for what they felt. Watching her mother come home tired and small made her angry in a steady way. She wanted to fix things without breaking them. Rafael had a voice that filled rooms. He liked short answers and quick results. He spoke to his executives with crisp commands. He praised profit and pushed for more. He had little patience for small mistakes. When a slide in a presentation was late, he scolded the young analyst in front of everyone. When the receptionist wore a dress he did not like, he told her her clothes were distracting. People who worked there learned to look down when he passed. They learned to make coffee strong and to always be on time. They learned that saying little kept them safe. But the things that hurt most were small and quiet. Once, Maria brought Rafael a sandwich made with care and wrapped in a clean napkin. He looked at it and tossed it aside, saying it was not the kind of bread he preferred. Maria felt a hot weight in her chest and pretended she did not notice. Omar, the pantry worker, counted his small stack of coins at night so he could buy his child medicine. Rafael scolded him for a missing spoon and did not ask why the man had not come to report a problem. These small hurts added up. They made people smaller in ways no one measured. Lena kept her eyes open. She watched her mother's hands tremble sometimes when she told the story of the day's work. She watched the way the receptionist avoided walking into the same room as Rafael. She listened to Omar's short coughs when he said he needed to save for medicine. Each small wrong felt like a pebble in Lena's pocket. One pebble by itself was light. Together they became heavy. At home, Lena kept a small notebook. She wrote dates, times, and words. She wrote short facts about what happened. She did this quietly so her mother would not worry more. Writing helped Lena feel solid. It made the small things into a pattern she could see. She did not want to be loud. She wanted to be careful. She wanted to make sure the truth had a strong shape. Lena also learned how the company worked. On paper, the company had rules. Human Resources had a neat page on the intranet that spoke of dignity and fairness. The rules looked good in meetings and in yearly reports. But the rules often stayed on paper. When someone complained in the past, they were told to use the right channels. Those channels slowed things. They led to polite emails and meetings where promises waited. People felt that the company cared more about its name than about their lives. Lena did not believe in rushing. She planned. She spoke to co-workers quietly and with care. Some were afraid to speak. They worried they would lose their jobs. Others shared small stories with her in whispers. A cleaner told Lena that he was blamed for a stain he did not make. The receptionist told Lena how her face had burned after Rafael's public comment. Omar told Lena about skipping breakfast to pay for medicine. Each story added another pebble to the pocket. She shared a plan with her mother in the evenings. Maria sat at the table with a cup of tea and listened when Lena spoke. "What will you do with these notes?" Maria asked softly. Lena held the cup like someone holding a small fire. She said, "I will show that we are asking for respect. We are not asking for more money. We are asking to be seen as people." Maria wanted to tell her to be careful. She wanted to protect Lena from risk. But when she looked at her daughter's face, she saw a calm that made her proud. She did not stop her. Lena started to gather more proof. She copied emails when orders were rude or unfair. She asked a co-worker to write down what had happened and to sign it if they felt safe. Some said yes and signed their names. Others wanted to stay anonymous. Lena wrote their words down anyway, keeping their trust. She learned how to protect them. She kept names locked in her notebook and saved messages to her own phone. She also learned to use help without making a scene. At the bakery, a woman named Sarah taught her how to use social posts to speak clearly. Sarah had friends who knew reporters. They told Lena to write a clear letter stating the facts and the change she wanted. Lena practiced. She wrote about the day Maria came home with trembling hands. She wrote about Omar and the receptionist. She wrote short sentences that would be hard to twist. She added the thing Mr. Ansari, her debate teacher, told her to add: "Say what you want to happen." So she asked for a fair review, for the return of anyone unfairly punished, and for training so leadership would learn to treat people with respect. The night before she posted the letter, Lena lay awake thinking. She thought about losing work, about rent, about the landlord's knock. She thought about the people who had been punished for speaking up in the past. Many of her friends had been careful in silence. But she also thought about the people who had been brave and found change. She decided to post the letter under her full name. She wanted to stand by each sentence. She did not want an anonymous noise. She wanted the truth to have a face. When she pressed send, she felt a small fear and a small power. She did not expect much. She hoped for an honest conversation. Within hours, messages came. People recognized the truth in her words. A local blogger wrote a short piece and linked to her letter. A reporter asked for an interview. Raphael's team issued the company's practiced line: "They took such claims seriously and had processes in place." The statement felt polished. It did not change the small wrongs. Inside the company, the air shifted. Some people were nervous. Raphael called a meeting and asked why private matters were public. He sounded sharp and annoyed. People who had told their stories felt unsafe. The receptionist avoided Lena in the hall. Omar came to the bakery and told Lena quietly, "Be careful." Lena felt a new weight. Her small lamp burned brighter, but the wind blew harder. She did not stop. She arranged a meeting with a reporter and brought a few co-workers who trusted her. The reporter listened and asked for dates and facts. He did not shout. He wrote carefully. The blogger's piece turned into a longer article. The story grew. The company offered to call a meeting and to bring in an outside consultant. Some felt relief. Others feared the company would only promise and not act. Lena prepared for the long work. She knew change did not come from a single voice alone. She knew the rope she had tied from small facts needed many hands to pull. She tightened the knots. She kept writing. She kept listening. She held her mother's hand at night and felt proud in a quiet, steady way. She understood that facing a man like Raphael would not be about anger. It would be about truth and calm courage, and she was ready to begin. Lena moved carefully. She knew that sudden actions could scare people away. She wanted steady steps that would hold, not quick shouts that would break. Each evening after classes and after her shift at the bakery, she sat with her small notebook and her phone. She wrote more facts. She dated each note. She copied names from emails. She saved photos of messages that showed rude orders or unfair demands. Lena learned to keep the truth in small, exact pieces. Facts, she believed, were slow weapons. They did not burn, they cut clear. She spoke quietly to people she trusted. At first, many shook their heads. They had learned to be careful. Losing a job in the city could mean losing a home. Some feared their rent, others feared being seen as troublemakers. Lena listened without pressure. She asked only what they were willing to give. A cleaner named Anil agreed to write down what had happened to him. He wrote about a day he had been blamed for a spill he did not make. A junior analyst, still nervous and new to the job, agreed to share an email where Raphael had called her presentation lazy. Omar, the pantry worker, handed Lena a folded paper that listed days he had worked while worrying about his child's medicine. Each person's words were short and honest. At home, Lena told her mother a little at a time. Maria worried and wanted her daughter to stop. "You are young," she said. "You have your studies. You have your life." Lena held Maria's hand and showed her the notebook. "This is not about revenge," Lena said. "It is about being seen. It is about making sure other people do not feel small like you did." Maria looked at her daughter and saw a seriousness that quieted her fear. She agreed to let Lena continue, but only if Lena kept her name out of public at first. Maria did not want attention. She wanted dignity. Lena learned to ask for small help. Sarah from the bakery taught her how to write a clear letter that would not be twisted. "Keep it short," Sarah said, folding dough with strong fingers. "Say what happened, who it hurt, and what you want." Lena followed the advice. She wrote a letter that did not attack Raphael like a headline. It read like a list of small truths, dates, short quotes, and the exact changes they asked for: an independent review, fair process for complaints, and training for leaders to learn respectful behavior. Mr. Ansari, her debate teacher, told her to add who would be responsible for the change. Lena named an independent agency and asked that the company pay for an outside review. The teacher nodded. "People want answers," he said. "Give them a clear place to go." When Lena posted the letter the next morning, she felt the same small fear she felt before bedtime, a prick behind the eyes and a steady heartbeat. She put it on a city forum and on her social pages under her real name. She wanted to show she would stand by her words. Within hours, people began to respond. Some wrote supportive notes. Others shared similar experiences from other companies. A local blogger reached out and asked to meet. A reporter sent a polite message asking if Lena would let him use her name. The responses were careful and slow. Nothing exploded. Nothing fell apart. But things moved. The company's communications team replied first with a polished message. They wrote that the company took such claims seriously and that they had policies in place. The message read like a tidy picture in a frame. Raphael's public voice, through the company, promised to look into the matter. Inside the building, the air changed. People watched news on small screens and passed messages between desks in low voices. The receptionist avoided Lena in the hall. Omar came into the bakery and said, "Keep your head down." He did not sound brave. He sounded tired. Lena arranged a small meeting with the reporter and 3 co-workers who trusted her enough to speak openly. They met at a quiet coffee shop far from the glass tower. Lena felt the room settle as they spoke. The reporter asked simple questions. He wanted dates, names, and copies of messages. Lena handed him a small stack of printed notes and emails. She watched his pen move. He did not shout. He did not promise to change the world. He promised only to write what he heard. The first article that followed was careful and calm. It told short stories: a sandwich thrown aside, a scolding in a meeting, a man who skipped meals so his child could have medicine. The piece did not exaggerate. It let the small truths speak. The story reached more people than Lena had expected. A podcast about worker dignity asked to interview her. Messages came from strangers who wrote about similar pain in their jobs. Some offered legal help. Others offered to connect Lena with groups that worked on workplace rights. Inside the company, the board felt the pressure. Investors did not like uncertain headlines and bad numbers. The board asked the executives to respond. Raphael called a meeting, his voice sharp at first. He asked why anyone would make private matters public. He spoke of loyalty and of the company's good work. But even as he spoke sharply, the world around him had shifted. A polite company statement was no longer enough. Raphael's first private reaction was anger. He doubted he had been cruel. He saw himself as direct, efficient, and necessary. Yet he had been forced to listen to stories that made his words feel heavy when he read them in print. The board, wary of risk, asked for an independent review. The company offered to meet Lena and some staff, and they suggested a town hall so Raphael could hear directly. To some, the town hall felt like a chance for change. To others, it felt like a public stage where people might be used. Lena prepared for the meeting. She practiced how to speak in short, calm sentences. Mr. Ansari taught her to use pauses and to look people in the eye. Facts first, he said. Feelings after. Lena wrote a short list of things she wanted to say, small stories, what she wanted changed, and what protections people should have. She practiced breathing. The night before, she barely slept. Her mind turned the small facts like coins in a pocket, checking each one for a clear edge. When the meeting was scheduled, there was fear and hope in equal measure. Some who had agreed to speak changed their minds at the last minute. They feared losing what they had. Others came and sat with steady faces. The company had set rules, the meeting would be recorded, and the company would have time to respond. Lena accepted the rules because she knew the truth mattered more than perfect shelter. The day of the meeting, Lena walked into the room with two co-workers. The air smelled of coffee and new carpet. Raphael sat at the front with a line of executives behind him. He began by reading a prepared statement that promised an investigation. His voice was calm but distant. People took turns telling short stories. Each story was simple and true. Anil described being blamed for a spill he had not done. Omar described a week when he could not afford medicine and felt guilty for the choice. A junior analyst spoke about being publicly criticized. When Lena stood to speak, the room was quiet. She did not shout. She did not cry. She spoke like someone placing stones on a path. She told the story of her mother bringing a sandwich that was tossed aside. She read short, exact lines from her notebook. She asked for what she had asked in her letter, the independent review, the protection of employees who came forward, and training for leaders to learn dignity. Her voice did not shake as much as she had feared. Raphael listened. At first, his face was closed. He answered in the manner he had always used, with a defense that mixed pride and a belief in his own method. He spoke of efficiency, of the need for quick decisions, and of a culture that rewarded results. But something in the meeting moved him. He asked abruptly, and without bravado, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" It was a real question, not a defense. Lena felt the room change. She said simply, "People were afraid they would lose their work." The answer was small and heavy. The meeting did not end with applause or a grand apology. It ended with promises to investigate and to listen. The company announced an outside consultant and some immediate steps, training and a hotline for concerns. For Lena and many others, the steps felt like real beginnings. For some, the steps felt fragile. They wanted proof, not words. After the meeting, Lena walked home with her notebook in her hand. She had spoken, and people had listened. The path ahead was not clear, but for the first time it felt possible. She and her mother sat together and drank tea. Maria asked quietly, "Are you tired?" Lena nodded, feeling the weight but also a strange lightness. She had begun to pull the rope that might change things. She knew the road would be long. She knew she would have to keep the facts strong and the courage steady. But she also felt something she had not felt before, a small, steady confidence that truth and careful work could change a room full of people who once felt too powerful to face. The story around Lena and her quiet courage began to grow after the first meeting. The city had already seen the article in the local paper and the careful blog post. Now, more voices joined. Some came from within the company, others from outside, and each one made the rope she had tied a little stronger. At first, Raphael tried to fight back. He gave short interviews where he said the complaints were exaggerated. He insisted that his style was simply direct and that great companies needed leaders who spoke without wasting time. But when he saw the words in print, when he heard the podcast episodes where people described the weight of small humiliations, he could not shake the feeling that he was being forced to look into a mirror. Inside the office, the tension was sharp. Some employees felt encouraged and began to speak about their own stories in hushed conversations. Others feared what might happen if they were too honest. Lena noticed both sides. She saw a few heads held higher, and she also saw co-workers who crossed the street to avoid being seen with her. She understood. Not everyone could risk their job. She did not judge them. Then came the investors' meeting. Shareholders asked about numbers, yes, but they also asked about culture. They wanted to know why employee turnover had risen and why analysts left after only a year. The questions were polite, but they cut deep. For the first time, the board looked at Raphael not as a symbol of success, but as a risk to reputation. It was clear that ignoring these complaints could cost real money. At the same time, something unexpected began to happen. Activists outside the company organized a peaceful rally. They held up simple signs that read, "Respect at work and words matter." They were not loud, but their presence was steady. Reporters came. Cameras caught not only the signs, but also the faces of cleaners, pantry workers, and receptionists who stood nearby. Lena stood among them, quiet but firm. She did not speak into the microphones. She let the signs and the presence speak. Raphael saw the news coverage that evening. He felt cornered in a way he had never felt before. His power had always been enough to silence complaints. Now, it seemed, even his wealth could not erase these small truths. He called his communications team, but their words felt empty even to him. For the first time, he admitted, though only in private, that he might have to change. The board demanded action. They insisted on a town hall where Raphael would face employees directly. The idea frightened many staff, but Lena saw it as necessary. She prepared again. She read her notes, rehearsed short sentences, and practiced staying calm. She reminded herself that anger could be dismissed, but clarity could not. The day of the town hall arrived. The large conference room was filled with staff, board members, and a camera for recording. Raphael entered with his usual sharp presence, but his eyes showed unease. He gave a short opening, promising to listen. Then the stories began. Anil spoke about being blamed for a spill he had not made. His voice trembled, but he did not stop. Omar described the nights he had gone hungry to pay for medicine. The receptionist described the shame of being criticized in front of colleagues. Each story was like a small stone dropped into the room, creating ripples that touched everyone. Finally, Lena stood. The room hushed. She spoke clearly and slowly. She described the sandwich her mother had prepared that was tossed aside. She told how Maria had come home that night and sat silently at the kitchen table, too tired to cry. She spoke of small wrongs that added up until people no longer felt human. And then she asked, calmly and firmly, for what she had always wanted, a true independent review, protection for employees who spoke, and leadership training that would teach respect. Raphael listened. At first, his reply was defensive. He spoke of efficiency, of needing discipline to build a great company. But then he paused. His voice softened just slightly as he asked, "Why did no one tell me before?" Lena answered without hesitation, "Because they were afraid, sir. Afraid of losing their work, afraid their words would mean nothing. When one person speaks to power, it rarely changes the room." The silence after her words was deep. People shifted in their seats. Some nodded slowly. For the first time, Raphael seemed to see not just complaints, but people. He ended the meeting with a promise vague, but different from before. He promised to listen again, to review the culture, and to work with the independent consultant the board had already approved. The town hall did not fix everything, but it changed the balance. For the first time, Raphael had been asked to listen not as a boss, but as a man. For the first time, Lena saw that even someone at the very top could be made to hear the truth when enough voices spoke together. That evening, she walked home with her mother. Maria asked her if she was proud. Lena smiled, tired but steady. "I'm not proud yet," she said. "But I know this is only the beginning." The rope she had tied from small truths had pulled a powerful man into a room where he could no longer look away. And Lena knew she would not stop until the promises became more than words. After the town hall, the air in the company changed, though not all at once. Promises had been spoken, but promises could be like polished glass, shiny on the outside, fragile inside. Still, people felt something had shifted. For the first time, Raphael had not brushed away every complaint. He had listened, even if briefly, and had said he would review. That small moment gave workers a thread of hope, and Lena knew she had to keep holding that thread so it did not slip away. The board of directors acted quickly. Investors were restless, and news of the town hall had spread in the press. They announced that an independent consultant would lead a full review of the company's workplace culture. A committee was formed to supervise it, with outside experts, one board member, and for the first time a representative of support staff. This was new. People like Maria, who once folded sheets quietly in the background, suddenly had a voice in the process. The announcement felt unusual, almost like a storm clearing to let sunlight through. Employees reacted in different ways. Some were relieved. The receptionist who once avoided eye contact began to smile more often. Omar, who had worried about medicine for his child, allowed himself a day off for the first time in months. Yet others were cautious. They had lived long enough in silence to know that change could vanish if leaders lost interest. "We will see," whispered one cleaner to another in the hallway. Raphael struggled with this new reality. He was not used to being questioned. He had built his empire by being firm, by speaking sharply, by believing speed mattered more than softness. At first, he argued with the committee. He said that his directness was the reason the company had grown so fast. He warned them that too much kindness might make workers lazy. But the consultants did not back down. They presented research showing that companies with respectful workplaces kept their best employees and made better profits in the long run. They told stories of leaders who had lost everything because they ignored dignity. For the first time, Raphael could not push their words aside. One afternoon, the committee gave Raphael a folder. Inside were written testimonies from staff. He sat at his desk and read them alone. He read how the receptionist cried in her car after being embarrassed. He read how Omar had eaten bread and water for days to save money for his child's medicine. He read Maria's words, written carefully by Lena, describing the way her hands had shaken when a sandwich was tossed away. Raphael leaned back in his chair, and for once, no sharp word came. The paper in his hands felt heavier than any financial report he had ever signed. Meanwhile, Lena kept busy. She did not stop with the town hall. She continued meeting staff in small groups, listening to their stories, and teaching them how to write down facts clearly. She explained how important it was to protect details, because details made change possible. She guided Maria through writing her own claim, describing the humiliation she had faced, not for revenge, but for fairness. Lena saw her mother straighten her back a little when she handed the paper to the review team. For Maria, the act of being heard was as important as any money. The committee began to suggest changes. They recommended training for all managers, not just on business, but on respect. They set up a hotline that went directly to the independent team, not to the company's HR department. They created a small emergency fund to support staff in crisis so no one would have to skip meals for medicine again. These were early steps, but they were real. The city watched closely. Activists praised the progress but warned it must not stop at words. Newspapers published updates, some cautious, some hopeful. People on social media argued about whether Raphael deserved a second chance or whether he should step down. For Lena, the noise outside mattered less than the small changes inside. She noticed when the janitors asked for supplies without fear. She noticed when her mother came home with less trembling in her hands. These were signs that the rope was pulling tight. Raphael began to change in small, private ways. He met with a psychologist who worked with leaders, something he would have once called a waste of time. He reached out quietly to people he had once dismissed, asking them to explain how his words had hurt. He was not always graceful. At times he defended himself too much. But little by little, his sharp edges softened. One night, he found an old letter from his mother. In it, she had written about the importance of kindness, long before he had become rich. Reading it, he felt a sting of regret he could not shake. Weeks later, Raphael did something unexpected. He wrote a short, handwritten note to Maria. In it, he apologized for the way he had treated her and asked to meet her in a quiet, neutral place. Maria hesitated, unsure if she wanted to face him. But with Lena by her side, she agreed. The meeting was simple. Raphael spoke softly, without the tone of command. He said he had been wrong. He admitted he had not realized the cost of his words. Maria listened quietly, then told him how his actions had made her feel small. She did not shout. She spoke with the steady dignity of someone who knew her worth. Raphael listened, and in his eyes, there was no defense this time, only acceptance. That meeting did not erase the past, but it planted a seed. Maria walked away with her head high, feeling lighter. Lena walked beside her, proud not only of the apology, but of her mother's courage. And Raphael walked away knowing that leadership was not only about profits or decisions, but about the way one person could shape the lives of many. The company began to rebuild itself. The independent consultant shared their first report, highlighting areas that needed deep change. The board approved new policies, including a clear promise that every employee from cleaners to executives had the right to dignity. Scholarships were offered for children of staff to continue their studies, and Lena was encouraged to apply. Apprenticeships were created to help support staff move into new roles if they wished. Not everyone trusted the changes. Some employees still feared the worst. Some had already left, tired of waiting. But others stayed and helped push the company forward. The culture began to bend slowly, like a branch leaning toward sunlight after years in the shade. For Lena, the most important victory was not in headlines, but in everyday life. Her mother came home with stories that were less heavy. Her co-workers began to speak more openly about their needs. She herself felt calmer, knowing that her small notebook filled with facts had turned into something larger than she had ever imagined. And for Raphael, the most surprising thing was how people began to look at him differently. At first, they saw him as the rude billionaire who had to be forced to listen. Later, some began to see him as a man trying to learn. Not everyone forgave him, but some respected his attempt to change. He had gone from being feared to being watched, and now, slowly, he was becoming someone who could be held accountable. It was not the end of the story, but it was a new chapter. Promises were turning into actions, and people were learning that even the most powerful could be asked to change. The work was not finished, but the path was open, and for Lena and Maria, that was enough reason to keep walking with courage. When the weeks turned into months, the company began to look different, though not in a sudden way. Change never came overnight. It grew slowly, like small plants after a long storm. The independent review team finished their first report and gave clear steps for the company to follow. They wrote about dignity, about respect, and about the responsibility of leaders to build a safe space for every worker. For many employees, these words felt like fresh air after years in a closed room. Maria noticed the difference first in the little things. When she delivered coffee, she no longer felt eyes ready to search for mistakes. Supervisors began to thank her for her work. They used simple words like good job or thank you. For Maria, those words felt heavy, because she had spent years working in silence. Even Omar, the pantry worker, received help from the new emergency fund. His child's medicine was paid for without him skipping meals. These small changes were not headlines, but they were life-changing for the people who had been silent for so long. Lena's life also changed. The company's new scholarship program for children of staff opened doors she had only dreamed of. She applied with a simple essay about truth and dignity. In it, she wrote how small facts could build a rope strong enough to pull even the most powerful man into a room where he had to listen. The committee approved her scholarship, and suddenly, Lena could focus on her studies without worrying about bills. She spent less time at the bakery and more time in the library, planning a future in law or social work, somewhere she could keep helping people find their voices. The city did not forget the story. For a while, Raphael's name appeared in headlines every week. Some people wanted him punished. Others wanted him to prove he could truly change. He chose not to resign. Instead, he remained as CEO, but with less control over certain areas. Human Resources was moved under the direct supervision of the Oversight Committee. Training programs began, not only for junior staff but also for senior executives. Every leader in the company had to attend workshops where they learned about communication, empathy, and the cost of disrespect. Some mocked the sessions at first, but slowly, people began to understand that the culture was shifting. Raphael himself became quieter. The sharpness in his voice did not disappear overnight, but he learned to pause before speaking. He sought advice from people outside his circle of power, people who told him the truth without fear. He even visited the community kitchen that his company had funded in one of the poorer neighborhoods. There, he served food quietly alongside volunteers. He did not wear a suit. He wore a simple apron. It was not for cameras, no reporters were called. For Raphael, it was the beginning of something new, learning that leadership was not only about command but also about service. Maria and Lena's lives improved in simple but meaningful ways. They moved into a slightly larger apartment with a small balcony. Maria placed plants there, herbs and flowers that caught the morning light. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe without fear of the next day's work crushing her spirit. Lena studied in that light, her notebooks open beside the plants, her mother's quiet pride surrounding her like a shield. One spring, Lena graduated. She walked across a stage in a modest gown, holding her diploma. Maria sat in the front row, her eyes shining. The college invited Raphael to speak at the event, not as a powerful CEO, but as someone who had gone through public learning. He sat at the back of the hall, listening to the graduates. When Lena spoke in her student address, she did not mention his name. She spoke instead of courage, of patience, and of the power of truth spoken calmly. She said that real change begins when one person dares to stand, but it lasts only when many join together. Her words drew steady applause. After the ceremony, Raphael approached Lena quietly. He did not ask for attention. He simply said, "Thank you." His voice was softer, no longer the voice of command but the voice of a man who had been changed. Lena nodded. She did not need more. She had never wanted fame or revenge. She wanted dignity for her mother, fairness for her co-workers, and a better path for those who would come after. That was enough. Over time, the company's reputation began to heal. The scholarships, the emergency fund, and the apprenticeships helped rebuild trust. Some employees left, unable to forgive, but many stayed, finding the workplace safer than before. The oversight committee remained active, ensuring the promises were kept. Slowly, the culture turned. It was not perfect, but it was better. For Lena, the journey taught her that change is never one loud event. It is steady, patient work. It is small facts collected with care. It is the courage to speak when silence feels easier. It is the dignity of people like her mother, who endured years of disrespect but never lost their quiet pride. Years later, when people told the story of the rude billionaire CEO and the maid's daughter, they did not speak only of conflict. They spoke of transformation, of how truth tied together by courage could bend even the strongest walls. They spoke of Maria's dignity, Lena's calm fire, and Raphael's slow learning. And they spoke of how one daughter's stand had lit a path for many others to walk. The story did not end with anger. It ended with growth, with steady change, and with a city that learned something important: even the most powerful must listen, and even the quietest voices can be strong enough to be heard.